modern history during 3-time bonus sprints and 5 Category 4 climbs. Basically, bumps in the road. Ivan Ladanois has already come through the finish line of the first sprint. That's Jamaluddin Abdujaparov taking second. Now let's join Phil and Paul at about 54 miles into today's stage.
And the riders have now covered 87 kilometers. This is the feeding station here as the riders pass through, and they're something like 2 minutes behind the lone attacker of the day. They're not too concerned. The rider out front is Yvon Ladanois, a GAN rider, a French rider celebrating, in fact, his 26th birthday today, and he's gone on the attack right from the gun. And the riders stoking up for the last half of this race, and as we expected, Paul, they have been going at quite a speed. Ladanois now beginning to lose about a minute. He had 3 minutes 15 seconds at one stage at round about 72 kilometers covered. A little bit further down the road now, and that lead beginning to tumble.
It'll get smaller and smaller, I think, as we get nearer to Le Havre, because there are many riders who want this breakaway to be caught. But it was interesting to note as we went through the feeding station there, the Bonesto team of Miguel Indurain were at the front. Every time there looks like being any danger, Indurain moves to the front, which is something he hasn't done in the past. He's taken a lot of risks and sat at the back of the bunch, so he knows that it's been dangerous. We've had a crash early in the day with Henrik Redan going down from the TVM squad, so every time it's dangerous, Indurain moves forward.
And that was really very sad about Redan. He crashed very early after the start this morning. He has facial injuries and is now in the hospital, back at the start line at Alençon. 2 riders out of the Tour today. Marc Sergeant of Belgium did not start the stage, so surprisingly in these early days the race has now lost 9 men. And I think we'll see some changes in the race leaders' jerseys as well today, because Francois Simon, who started the day in the polka dot jersey of King of the Mountains leader, has not been scoring well at all today because he was apparently sick during the team time trial yesterday and has dropped away from that competition. So there'll probably be a new leader in the King of the Mountains by the end of this day. The green jersey, though, of Jamaluddin Abdujaparov, that seems to be in safe hands at the moment, because Abdu has been sprinting extremely well at the interim sprints along the route, and behind Ladanois, who has been sweeping up all of the prizes before him, he has been taking second place consistently in the sprints, which count towards that green jersey competition. The yellow jersey has not mixed in the action at all so far, which is something of a surprise, and Laurent Jalabert holding on to that 8-second lead in yellow, but has not yet taken part in the sprints.
That indicates that Yvan Ladanois is 1 minute 10 seconds ahead of the peloton. This is stage 4 of the 95 Tour de France. We're at the 90-kilometer mark of this stage, about 56 miles in. Now, there are 2 riders ahead of the peloton chasing down Yvan Ladanois of Team GAN. He broke away at about 11 miles in. Those 2 men are Bruno Thibault and Francesco Cabello. This is Ladanois. Remember, Team GAN with 7 members left. Back here now, Jackie Duran, the man who wore the yellow jersey for the first few days of the Tour, he fell back to pick up his teammate Emmanuel Meignen. Meignen possibly feeling the flu or some other bad physical effects. Back at the front, Ladanois. Here's Phil and Paul again.
And now the 2 are joining the leader here, because this is Yvon Ladanois. Takes a good look across at Francis Cabello for the McElmay squad, and also coming up is Bruno Thibault of Castorama. They've come across the gap very quickly. It dropped down to just over a minute. They have crossed the gap. They've reached Yvon Ladanois, and now there are 3 riders in front. 1 from Spain and 2 from France. Now, Cabello is well known to us because this is the young man that distinguished himself when the Tour de France went to England last year, and he won the stage into Brighton.
And this is a good move because they've just gone through the feeding station, and what very often happens in a professional race after that zone is the riders will slow down a little bit just to stock up their pockets with the food that they've picked up, and there's a slowing down process goes on, and it may well give this breakaway a chance to open up the gap again.
And there is Francis Cabello, who's developing now into being an extremely good bike rider after his victory last year in the stage of the Tour de France. There's the main field. The gap is not very significant now. They might feel that they've got this race a little bit under control. Cabello won a stage of the Ruta del Sol in his own country this year, but it was way back in February when he finished 2nd overall. And so as they always say, once you do distinguish yourself in the Tour de France, then everything seems to go just right. Here is Francois Simon, the polka dot jersey wearer. Hasn't been in the action at all day today, Paul, and he doesn't look at all well.
It seems to me as if there's been some kind of illness has struck the Castorama team, because Emmanuel Magnan, the man who's doing so much work over the first couple of days for Jackie Durand, is also at the back suffering. And in fact, Jackie Durand sat up and waited for him to try and help his teammate to get back into the safety of the main field. A shame for Simon here. He looks over his shoulder to see where Magnan is. They really must have been struck by some kind of food poisoning in the night, because it's amazing to see a team just struck down like this.
That is bad news for Magnan, Paul. Let's take a look at who's wearing what in France right now. Francois Simon wearing red polka dots. That honors the best mountain climber. Jamaluddin Abdjajaparov wore green as the best sprinter, all in 94. Today's stage of sprinters race, so he may lose that. And Laurent Jalabert stays in yellow as the overall leader of the Tour. With just under 60 miles to go in stage 4, 3 riders are still out in front of the peloton, and some indecision in the pack of riders. Do they let them go or go out and pull them back in? Here's Phil and Paul.
And the field trying to organize the chase here now. There are a lot of riders, it seems, want to get on with the race today. Those 3 riders are still literally just ahead of the field. The last time check we had was 16 seconds. And a number of teams wanting to break the grip of the sprinters, because the finish in Le Havre, and there is confirmation of that 16-second fall, but the sprinters in Le Havre, it is a very, very dangerous approach.
It is, because there are 2 good climbs before we get into Le Havre itself anyway. That's maybe where 1 or 2 riders will try and launch themselves away. What's happened here now, in fact, is Le Danois, who'd been away since kilometre 25, has been dropped, and he's been caught by the main pack. The 2 leading riders now, Bruno Thibault of Castorama and Francis Cabello, have about 16 seconds, but you can see the main field really starting to pick it up before they get to the outskirts of the town.
Just over 95 kilometres covered, so they're about 65 kilometres from the finish, just over 40 miles to go. And this is the time now when the teams will start to whip up their men and increase the pace. I can see 1 or 2 Motorola riders there, Paul, in the blue jerseys, trying to take their position at or near the front. Now, they haven't really done Frankie Andreu any great favours in a quest to get him into that yellow jersey, because their team time trial yesterday was a long way below par for them in many ways.
It was. They've spent a lot of time trying to train and get into that team time trial, but you have to think that the Gavis team and the Banesto team did an absolutely superb performances yesterday, so Motorola weren't too far off the mark.
Paul, you're right. Frankie Andreu, one of the team leaders, is competing in his 4th Tour de France. And he can take pride in the fact that he has finished 3 tours, the most memorable on last year's tour, in what in the racing world is called the sport's most beautiful stage, the Champs-Élysées. Today, we profile Motorola's Frankie Andreu.
Frankie Andreu is coming up to the 1 kilometre ban of the red kite, and it looks very much to me, if Frankie can keep going, he's going to take the 2nd stage victory on the Champs-Élysées by an American rider. He's got a great gap at the moment. Frankie, whatever you do, don't look back.
Well, Andreu is going to lead them on to the Champs-Élysées for the last time, but I'll tell you, Eddie Seigneur is coming like an express train there. Chris Bournemouth from the GAN team gave them victory number 1 on the first day of the Tour de France, and Seigneur is going to close it with their next victory. And he goes by Frankie Andreu in sight of the line. Eddie Seigneur gives GAN the top and the tail of this year's Tour de France.
Frankie Andreu, really the unsung hero of American cycling. When given the chance, he has proven he can finish with the best. Totally devoted to his team. An outstanding leader. Now, back on the course, a lot of movement at the front of the peloton. With 29 miles to go, the race could explode as the leaders smell the finish.
Well, there are constant attacks coming out of the peloton now. This is Bruno Boscardin at the front of these 3 riders. In fact, they're getting up to him again. He opened a small gap in pursuit of the 2 leaders, but he has been brought back to heel. This is his 2nd Tour de France. He didn't make it last in 1993. He abandoned the race on stage 11. He didn't ride last year, and now he's back in the fold in 1995. And again, Paul, we're seeing at the front there a lot of appearances by the Once riders. These are the 2 leaders. The gap is around about 25 seconds, but you can see that, in fact, there is a little bit of doubt as to the progress here coming from Bruno Thibault, riding his first Tour de France. Cabell can tell him all about what it's like.
Well, he can, because he won the stage last year into Brighton, but what is an advantage for these riders at the moment is there's no organized chase behind. There's teams trying to get clear, and it's interesting to notice it always seems to be the Italians. There are 61 Italians in this year's Tour de France, which is a major factor. Aki GPME here going clear at the moment. If we count them as being an Italian team, and they are mainly Italians, there are 9 Italian teams on the start line of this year's Tour, so they really are the dominant nation in the Tour de France.
Not so long ago, in fact, when I came to my early Tours de France in the mid-70s, the one thing that the organisers wanted most was to get Italian riders to take part in the Tour de France. They didn't want to come here. They said the race was too hard. They didn't like the food. They didn't particularly like France, and they wouldn't come. Well, now they make up nearly double any other country's participation. The second country is France, and the Italians this year have more riders than ever, and that's because Italy at the moment is leading the world in professional cycling. They are providing winners all of the time. And this looks like another newcomer to the Tour de France here, Denis Zanetta, who is trying to now create the reaction that will bring back those two leaders. We've now gone to the back of the field again here, and this is the Castorama team. They are in all sorts of trouble.
They really are, but you can see now why Martinelli was looking over his shoulder before. He's waiting for this trio of Castorama riders to come out to him. At the front, Jackie Durand being the helpless worker. He's doing all he can just to drag his two teammates to the finish. Not a thought about himself. All he wants to do is for these two Castorama riders to survive, and in a moment there'll be 4 of them, so it may well be they'll have a chance of getting inside the elimination. In fact, there was a Chazal rider who's been dropped off there as well, so a lot of riders at the back of this main field today having awful trouble. This is Christophe Meunier, who's a first-year professional. He rode on the French amateur team last year. He too is having a great deal of difficulty.
Stage 4 of the Tour de France. Team Once in the pink jerseys with mate Laurent Jalabert in the yellow is trying to chase down the 2 riders out in front of the peloton. Let's rejoin Phil Liggett now.
Well, the riders have now moved on to around about 114 kilometres covered. We're on the 4th category climb of the Côte de Bonville, and Yvon Le Danois was caught first of all by 2 riders, Francisco Cabello, who won the stage into Brighton when the Tour de France visited England last year, and Bruno Thibault of the Castorama team. They were too quick for the tiring Le Danois. He's back in the main field, being led at the moment by Neil Stevens, and the gap has tumbled down. It's around about 25 seconds, and in fact Mariano Rojas there in the pink on the left having a little word with Eros Poli of the Mercatoni Uno squad, and I don't quite know what they said, but there's a little bit of gesticulation. These are now the 2 leaders, and Francisco Cabello of the Kelme team is the rider in 2nd position. Thibault is the best placed of the escapers now. He lies 28 to 2 minutes and 9 seconds up. But the list of retirements is growing, Paul. We've had Citero and Manzoni both give up now. We know Citero crashed the other day. We saw him fall, and I presume he's still suffering from injury. Nothing on Manzoni, but 3 riders abandoned today, and Marc Sergeant a non-starter. So the field is getting thinner very early on in this year's Tour.
After 2 or 3 days, it really is starting to split up an awful lot. There are 3 Castorama riders over 1 minute behind the main field at the moment, led by Jackie Durand, who isn't suffering, but he has 2 teammates who are ill with some kind of flu. That's Emmanuel Magnan, who we saw doing an awful lot of work in the first couple of days, and Francois Simon, the man who is leading at the moment the King of the Mountains competition.
Well, on the climb here now, and the tempo being set by Eros Poli, so the Once boys have found themselves a little bit of help today, because of course Poli is hoping they can close this race down and give the Lion King, Mario Cipollini, another shot at the first place down in Le Havre. But the finish today is extremely difficult indeed. They climb around the town of Le Havre, and then they have some tortuous descents before they get down to the seafront, where they've actually cut away 2 halves of 2 roundabouts to give the riders a straight shot. It is a very hazardous approach.
It is difficult, and I'm not so sure that it's going to suit somebody like Mario Cipollini today, because those 2 climbs on their way into Le Havre are really going to be used as a platform for some of the other teams who would like to jump clear and steal a victory away from the sprinters who've had a stranglehold on this year's Tour de France. But every time the race slows down, it's always the pink jerseys of the Once squad coming to the front, because they would very much like to keep Laurent Jalabert in the lead. And if they can put the pressure on in the final, then maybe he has a good chance to take the stage as well.
Well, Paul, I'm going to let you place yourself in this next category. The old pros, the oldest riders on the Tour. Canadian Steve Bauer, age 36, this his 11th Tour. Tony Rominger, time is running out for him at age 34. Miguel Indurain will be 31. He'll celebrate his birthday in stage 14. At age 22, Mario Rojas is the youngest here. Lance Armstrong only 23. Best of the new young riders at age 25, Russian Yevgeny Berzin.
And there we have Abdu Japarov with a puncture. He's just signaled to his team. Now he's been sprinting so well, but he's going to have a chase on his hands now to get back because the race is in full cry. On the outskirts of crossing the Pont de Normandie and taking them into Le Havre. Abdu Japarov got a tremendously good wheel change from the Nobel team mechanic there. And he's straight back into the action before all of the following cars have passed him by. And that should ensure his quick return to the main field. And the teammates are waiting for him. It looks as though Vyacheslav Yekimov, the thoroughbred greyhound of the team, is going to pace him back up to the bunch. So Abdu quickly into the slipstream. And in fact, this is Leon van Bon, who won the silver medal in the Olympic Games in Barcelona, and really is one of the great discoveries on the Nobel team. He won a stage of the Tour du Pont last year, and now he's been sent back to help Abdu Japarov get back into the race. There's all the following cars, and that should ensure the safe return of Abdu Japarov, and that's thanks to a great wheel change by the Nobel team. The other rider who's now come on board is Frans Maassen. So they've sent the quick men back to get Abdu in because the whole team is built around Abdu Japarov. These are the two leaders. The latest time check is 35 seconds. And they're doing extremely well to hold that field off because Le Havre is now on the horizon and the sprinters are determined to claw them back before they get there. And this is a crash, and it's happened as they've made a right turn at a roundabout, and one or two riders took the wrong side again of the central reservations in the road. This is one of the Mercatoni Uno riders who's on the floor. And this is a great shame, but you see the split in the road there, and it's happened a lot during the early days of this Tour de France. Riders have gone to the left instead of the right, and as a result, they have crashed. And this rider on the floor here looks to me as though it might well be Antonio Politano of Mercatoni Uno. And it is indeed, and he's looking very stunned, Paul.
Hats off to Bruno Thibault, who won a $6,000 bonus for crossing the new Normandy Bridge first. Let's go back to Phil Liggett.
So the riders now on the other side of the Seine, running off the superstructure and heading into the last 15 miles of racing today, and the peloton is now very, very tightly packed indeed. There'll be a lot of riders now, Paul, feeling that they can do something here, because I still don't feel it's a pure sprinter's approach to the line. If they can just get away on the little climb that's coming, they could stay away on the narrow streets around Le Havre.
Well, they could do, but even though on the race profile it only indicates one climb, there are actually two climbs on the run into the finish here, and those climbs will be ideal for riders who want to try and jump away and force a small break before we get down here onto the port in Le Havre. And it is a very treacherous descent down there as well, so one or two riders will take risks to try and open up the gap on the descent as well.
The riders at the front here are the Banesto team now of Miguel Indurain. What a shock he must have had yesterday to find himself losing time to the Gavis team of Evgeny Berzin. And Miguel himself not too far away from the front of the peloton, indicating once more he's going to keep himself away from trouble, because today we've had a number of silly little tumbles out from the peloton, and indeed 4 riders are out of the race today.
And I do feel that this is some form of a psychological war that Miguel Indurain is battling as well, because I've heard Tony Rominger say that it's not possible for Indurain to ride so close to the front. He'd never done this before, and it may well be that he just wants to stamp his authority and scare his opponents a little bit.
Now this lovely wide road will shortly be replaced by a rather badly paved and narrow back road as the riders swing away from the roads created for the new bridge here over the River Seine. And there's some examples of those roads, but very shortly they'll be sent off to the side roads and make a rather back street approach into Le Havre. The GAN team now trying once again to do well, and this is Francis Moreau, the former World Pursuit champion. Those long bronze legs of his, and trying to continue now where his teammate Ivan Le Danois this morning also was trying to celebrate his 26th birthday, I think with a race-long breakaway, but now he's back in the main field.
That's a superb move by Francis Moreau, and he was a man who was lying in third place in the overall standings in the early part of this Tour de France, but got robbed, if you remember, when he went the wrong side of one of those splits in the road that we were talking about a little bit earlier. There's a big problem with racing in France these days. They're putting down so many directional islands that it makes it difficult for the riders to come into towns and negotiate the finishes.
Well, he settled down in the style of a pursuiter, a man that races over the 4,000 meters distance on the tracks around the world, and if he gets into that and he opens up, he can keep the pace around about 30 miles an hour for a long time. Lamprey starting to now try and close down the gap. And this little rider here is Marco Serpellini. Well, he was the youngest rider in the race last year. I must confess, I haven't checked out all the ages yet. I'm not sure if he still is. He never made the finish in the Tour de France last year, but he's back again for another dose of painful experience over 3 weeks, and he's now joined the back wheel of Moreau.
Gives us a good chance here to look at the choice of equipment that riders are using these days. You know, a lot of people have asked about those very deep rims that the riders have, and in fact, there's no reason at all for them to be used in just wet conditions. The reason that they're used is that they're much more aerodynamic, and the man who called in and asked us about that, in fact, was Rob Myers, and Mr. Myers, that's the reason why. It's just for aerodynamics. It's nothing to do with wet weather.
So the back of the field go over the top. And then the two leaders go down underneath the race. So Lamprey, a team led by Maurizio Fondriest, has got their man up there in Marco Serpellini. And Gann have a man in the picture again today, as they have had virtually all day with Yvon Le Danois, but now it is in the frame Francis Moreau. Moreau Serpellini, Paul, although he's come across to Francis, he's not too sure whether he can work with him.
Not for the moment. Francis Moreau, you can see, is tucked down in a very aerodynamic position. In fact, the Gann team today have adopted a small miniature tri-bar, which is made by a company from Italy called Cinelli. And the reason for that is so they can try and get into an aerodynamic position in a road racing situation. And these bars, for the moment, have not been classified illegal. But there was a move to try and do so because a lot of the organizing bodies believe that they're a little bit dangerous for this kind of racing.
18 kilometers to go. That's just over 10 miles of racing. And now the road will begin. And the sun breaking through, as the weather forecast promised us. It's come in the last half hour of racing today. It's been a rather dreary day across Normandy. But Moreau is now trying to get clear with Serpellini. And this, by the way, for Francis Moreau is his 6th Tour de France. He's ridden since 1990. He's not a regular finisher. In fact, he never finished the race in 1990, either in 1992 or 1993.
Phil, just some information coming over the radio. In fact, Politano, who crashed just before the bridge, did get up and start again, and he's something like 2 minutes behind the main field at the moment, so he'll be up and he'll survive to start another day again tomorrow.
Well, that's good news for the Mercatoni Uno rider. And this is the sprint now as they come through here at Gompriville. 146 kilometers they've ridden now today, and no real contest. They've just carried on. They've much bigger fish to fry now. They're thinking of the finish in Le Havre. And so Francis Moreau, it was his turn at the front, so he went through as the winner of the sprint. Neither of them any interest really in that competition. It's more the domain of the sprinters like Laurent Jalabert, and this is a much more important sprint finish here. And it looks as though Jalabert has come forward and taken the 2 seconds. That is important. Jalabert's lead in the Tour de France is now up by 2 seconds, so he leads by 10.
Still an opportunity to profile Team Mercatoni Uno now, an old-style Italian team. 8 men devoted to bringing their star, Cipollini, to the front for the sprint. Small budget team, they can only afford 1 star, and that is Mario Cipollini. The sprinter and overall leader of the team is sponsored by a supermarket chain. All right, we're coming up on the last tough climb in today's race. Strong men trying to escape the sprinters before the finish.
But on this climb, it's going to all come together, and then they have a very tricky approach into Le Havre.
Well, that's the end of Francis Moreau's escape. In fact, Lance Armstrong coming to the front here, but it's a little bit too early to try and think about moving clear. He's shadowed straight away by Alex Zula in the pink jersey of the Once squad. He will do the work for Laurent Jalabert. And this is Armstrong, the young Texas, impetuous when it comes to the race finishes. As soon as there's a climb, he will always try and attack.
Well, they're just over the top of the climb. Armstrong will win the climb from Alex Zula, and it's the birthday boy's day out today, because after Le Danois celebrating his birthday, now Alex Zula is celebrating his birthday as well today. You may remember a couple of years ago, the Swiss rider had his best birthday present possible when he led the Tour de France and received the race leader's yellow jersey. Now he is a real contender all the way to Paris this time out, and Zula just riding at the front.
This looks like the other British rider in the Tour de France this year, Maximilien Chiandri on the front. He was followed straight away by one of the Lotto riders, and that may well have been Andre Schmil. And a little bit further down, you can see still it's the Once riders putting all the pressure on at the front.
So the field still together, having been a number of attacks that have failed to succeed. And again, the Gavies team are feeling very frisky now after what they did to this race yesterday. And they're now starting to hurt this field, and the Banesto team are taking much closer order now on Gavies and marking this rider very closely indeed.
With less than 5 kilometers to go to the finish, Johan Museo is burning through the streets of Le Havre. Phil Liggett is at the finish line.
Well, Museo is a very strong rider indeed, a former champion of Belgium. He's won the 2 stages of the Tour de France before, but look at the field lined out now, chasing him down. Museo won at Mont Saint-Michel and also in Paris in years gone by, and now the whole field is trying to match him pedal stroke for pedal stroke. He's inside 3 kilometers to go. The sprinters now will be trying to shove their way through at the back there and get up to Johan Museo. Not a bad sprinter himself, but today he's trying to hold them all off. A winner of the classic Tour de Flanders this year, Johan Museo, but I don't think he's going to win a stage of the Tour de France today. He may have to wait for another day.
Well, it's the Lotto squad of Wilfred Nellison, so Nellison must be in there somewhere taking over the pace. The light blue jerseys of the Mercatoni Uno squad as well. They realise that Mario Cipollini has got a chance to win this stage, and it looks today as if it will go. And there's somebody gone down in the corner.
Oh, my goodness me, that was the roundabout we were warned about, and they've gone straight on into the barriers, the majority of the riders on the right of the road. And that is a terrible crash. The next 2 roundabouts, in fact, have been cut in half, so they wouldn't be that sort of a situation.
And I have a feeling, Phil, there it may well be the yellow jersey went down there. Laurent Jalabert was the yellow jersey on the right-hand side. He's outside the 1 kilometre sign, so it may well be he's going to lose it today.
This is terrible. Laurent Jalabert has gone down, so too as Wilfred Nellison. How ironic. Both of the riders who crashed on Armentières a year ago are down again. Jalabert is away. There's one rider there injured quite seriously, I think. He's staying on the ground, but Jalabert will lose time and almost certainly the race lead. The rules are quite specific. If you are inside the final kilometre, you do not lose time, but he wasn't. He was 2.5 kilometres from the finish. Jalabert can only afford to lose 10 seconds here, and he is out of the yellow jersey. What a shame.
There's absolutely no chance of him getting back in at the moment. He's got Eric van der Aarden from the Brechelat team to help him there a little bit, but that was such a shame to go down in that corner. He was trying to dispute the sprint. They went down, somebody went straight on in the corner, and Jalabert got caught up in the action behind.
Well, the race goes on at the front, and here it is now as they will approach what will be the 1 kilometre to go banner, and it looks to me as though it's possibly Andre Schmil who is trying to break clear at the front, being chased by a rider from Motorola. But they will have seen the accident because it happened just off the front of the main peloton there when they went round the last roundabout on the course, because the other 2 roundabouts have been sliced in half to allow a straight passage. There's the 1 kilometre kite. The riders are now in 800 metres to go. And there's the other roundabout, in fact, which has been removed for the purpose of the race arrival today. And the sprinters trying to get desperately up. I think it's Martinelli who's got himself on the front here from the Mercatoni Uno team. I can't see, and I think, in fact, Cipollini has got himself into 2nd place now as we look head on to the camera. Bjorn Ries, who has a real chance of being the race leader now for Gavies, is 3rd or 4th in the line here. And look at this now as the Mercatoni Uno rider swings off. But in fact, it looks as though Cipollini is boxed in. He's trying to get through now. Cipollini coming through with that blue helmet on, but he's going to have to fight to get through now. He's waiting and waiting. Now he's coming. Cipollini is going to take his 2nd win. Mario Cipollini hits the line first and takes it quite convincingly. The rider who will take 2nd place there was just behind him was Eric Zabel of Telecom, and Abdu Jafarov stole the third place on the line.
Phil, before we take a look at the stage standings, a reminder, you called this earlier in the race. This chicane was going to be very dangerous. As we highlight the first rider to come through is so fast, we still can't tell exactly who it was. Absolute disaster in the streets of Le Havre. Breathing a sigh of relief, Mario Cipollini, 3 hours and 40 minutes, makes him the winner of stage 4. Miguel Indurain and Tony Rominger side by side once again. Lance Armstrong in 17th position. They avoided the crash. Sven won a stage the other day. Fabio Baldato, different look on his face, obviously. Some more of the carnage in the streets of Le Havre. This is what happened to the bicycle of Laurent Jalabert. Not a pretty sight. Mario Cipollini, strong man for Mercatoni Uno, not only wins the stage, but an outstanding effort as a sprinter. He now wears green. Ivan Gotti, well, this tiny climber was